What's up, guys? I just want to put a little pre-roll on the beginning of this podcast, episode 5. At the start of this podcast, our intention was to talk about the entire build process for our van. But ultimately, we started talking about the background of why we switched to a van. And that topic alone took the entirety of the hour. So we never got around to the build. But that's the beauty about this platform and this medium, is that we can really spend the time in this long-form format to discuss a specific topic. So for those of you that are interested why we switched from the Airstream to the truck camper, and then the truck camper to the Sprinter van, this is the episode for you. So without further ado, here's episode 5. Welcome to episode 5 of the Mish podcast.
5?
It's episode 5, but it's actually our 6th episode. That's because we have the...
Yeah, don't talk about it.
Okay. It's the secret one. It's 2.5.
Okay.
So last week, this is amazing because this is actually... We're only a week away from our last episode, episode 4, which we talked about the past 2 months of, since we've been in Europe and been in Croatia and what we've done. Kind of got you guys little caught up to what we're doing and why we're still here. We actually, got a little follow-up of that happening today. We went to the police station. For those of you that heard, we're waiting for my residency documents to come back from our application. And we were just kind of waiting for something to come in the mail. But we decided to call them today. And we called the person from the police station that we interviewed, because we have his number, and he said, just go to the main office and ask them what's going on. So that's what we did. We went in there, and we have some good news, some not the best news, but ultimately all of this should be sorted out by like middle of next week. So
crossing our fingers.
We're optimistic. So we could be out of here as soon as like Wednesday, Tuesday or Wednesday. We don't know. But anyways, we're back again this week. And I spent a good part of yesterday writing a blog post on mullenleash.com/blog about specifically the electrical system in our van build. So that kind of got me into thinking. And, there's a lot of comments that we've had across various social platforms that talks about, hey, what happened to your van build series on your YouTube channel? Are you guys going to keep uploading? And yes, we're going to. However, I think the last episode we uploaded was us kind of finishing up like the bed portion.
Yeah, I think so. Like the bunk area.
The bunk area. Do I have an episode of the kitchen counter too? I think we do.
Yeah.
So we didn't show the electrical system, which is why I wanted to write that blog post. We also didn't show the plumbing. We didn't show, our sort of the finishing work. But everything is still sort of work in progress.
Right.
So it's perfectly fine the way it is now for us to live in. And we've lived in it for a few months. And there are things that we might change. But for the most part, we're done. But since those things are done, we can now go back to the van. Our plan was to sort of do a few more videos of the van build on our YouTube channel to kind of show all the things that we've done since our last episode on YouTube. But until we do that, we decided to kind of do a sort of comprehensive, all about building our van episode for our podcast, which is what you guys are listening to now.
That's right, Dan. This is it.
So, do you have anything to add about where we left off with the van series on YouTube? And
yeah, we didn't talk about the electrical or the plumbing, or I don't even know if we did any tiling. I did it all on my Instagram stories, which I upload to YouTube separately in a little secret channel that nobody follows, but not on the main channel with like high quality. So all those little steps are recorded. And you have it on your, fancy camera, but we just haven't put it together. But next week, if we're out of here and first place we get settled, I think doing a van tour. And
yeah, that's another thing we haven't done is the full YouTube van tour. We just wanted that van tour to be like well produced, not hurried. We don't want to just kind of throw something out there. We wanted to be in a nice setting. We wanted to have time to be able to talk about everything and make it a very like comprehensive tour, sort of like this episode of our Build podcast that we're going to talk about comprehensively what we've done and our choices and all that. So, at some point we just have to do it.
And we're not in it, living in it right now. Like half of our stuff is probably in the village or in the apartment and split that we're in now as we're kind of waiting for paperwork. So I don't want to I don't want to have a van tour without 100% of our stuff inside.
Right. Well, but arguably it's a better time to do the tour because we won't have our stuff that's like scattered around as we're living. But maybe people want to see that too. I'd
rather see a more realistic thing than a fake, I took all my crap out of the van to pose on my bed, kind of thing. I rather like, this is all our stuff. This is how we do it.
Yeah, but knowing you're going to clean up. You're going to make it really tidy.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Because I like to do that anyways.
Right. I mean, ultimately, everything's going to have its place and they'll be put away. And it'll be how it looks on like a driving day, because when we're sort of set up at a campground or at a boondocking spot or wherever, usually our chairs come out, our, stuff on the counters, we're cooking, or the kids are playing toys or whatever, all that stuff will be out. But when we drive, things, go in their place. And going back to sort of why we seem like abruptly stopped our YouTube build series, which in my mind I felt like all the stuff that we showed were the things that when you see the last episode of our build series, the way that you see it then is pretty much how it looks now, with a few little like final touches missing because the kitchen counter and the stove was done, the bed and the cabinets were done, the fridge box and then the fridge were done. So everything else, the way you look at it now when you go inside our van, it wouldn't look that different. It's just the behind the scenes plumbing and electrical wiring and all that stuff. So we will get to all that. But with this podcast episode, we want to start with giving you guys some background. A lot of you, in this last week with episode 4, our last episode, we can tell that we had about 90 downloads, which 10 of those are probably me testing and you testing and us playing.
I'm not doing any testing.
Okay, it's just me. And then there's like your family, your mom, my mom, and our close friends. So there's a handful of you out there listening to this, and I'm assuming if you're listening to these early episodes or these episodes at all, that you guys follow us in other places. So I want to assume that you guys know our background. But for those of you that are kind of new to following our travels and following our social channels and listening to this podcast, we're going to go through a little bit of background for you, sort of where we've come from, because I think it helps to know why we decided to switch to a van. I know it seems like, oh yeah, because that's what everybody's doing. Everybody's buying a Sprinter van and doing that. But we have a very specific reason why we did it. And had we not decided to come to Europe, we would have probably stuck with what we had, which was a F-250 crew cab long bed with a 4-wheel camper. But so we can just dive right into the background, right? So we started traveling in a 2007 Airstream 25-foot front bedroom travel trailer. We bought it in 2008, October 2008.
Right.
And we started traveling in it just, in the Southwest, California, Arizona, Nevada. And our first cross-country trip, and we started full-timing in it, our first cross-country trip was 2010 when we took it all the way to Florida. And that's when Mila was born.
Right. When she turned 5 months old, we loaded her up for Airstream life.
Yeah, and this is back in the super early days for us, and there was no smartphones, there was no Facebook, there was no social media, so things were a little different back then. And the vehicle we used to tow it was a 2007 GMC Savannah 3/4 ton cargo van that was converted to a passenger with a third row of seats that folded out to a queen size bed. So our goal back then was always that, it'll be cool if we go somewhere, we just take the van and then we can, leave the Airstream somewhere and kind of go to. And we didn't really do it that much. We did it once. We did it in the San Juan Islands.
Oh, you're right.
So we did it once. We didn't actually sleep in it. We ended up buying a tent because we had 3 kids then. And that van didn't really sleep 5 people, and it wasn't set up to do that.
Yeah.
So arguably, we've been traveling in vans since 2007.
Technically.
Yeah, because even before the Airstream, we actually started out in 2007 just doing regional travel it's a pretty popular camper now. It's called the Tab. Mm-hmm. And back then in 2007, it was relatively new. And we thought it was really cool. It's kind of like a modern teardrop, and it has a U-shaped dinette that converts to a big bed, and it was just us and Ava. And Ava was just a newborn when we started doing that. And we really liked it. And the reason why we found Airstreams is because we went to go see it at the dealership. And the dealership that sold Tabs also happened to be an Airstream dealership. We saw them. We loved them. We looked at the price tag. We loved them a little less. But we knew if the opportunity was right, maybe we'd upgrade to an Airstream, which we did.
Yeah.
A year later.
The economy tanked and RVs got hit hard, and we found our brand new Airstream for a good deal.
Yeah, 2008. A lot of you guys, most of you guys know that it was the start of the Great Recession in the United States. And it was a major economic slowdown worldwide. So the dealership in San Diego, a couple hours south, 3-4 hours south of where we used to live in Ventura, went out of business. So the bank had repossessed every single one of their trailers, and they decided to let the RV dealership that sold other RVs across the street to try to liquidate the Airstreams for them. So long story short, we didn't end up buying it from that dealership, but we still got a really, really great deal. It was basically brand new. I mean, it was brand new. Yeah. It had just been sitting on the lot for a year. So it was the end of 2007. And was it 2007, 2008? No, it was the end of 2008, but it was a 2007 model.
Right.
So we have been Airstreamers, for most of our traveling years. And we upgraded to the Airstream from the Tab because we knew we were going to go full time and we wanted a lot more space. And having come from a traditional, we never lived in the big house. The house we used to live in Ventura was 950 square feet and 2-bedroom, 1 bath, small kitchen built in the 1920s.
5, maybe?
Yeah, it's an old
Spanish
bungalow, California bungalow, close to the beach. Ventura is a great town, and we love where we used to live, and we love the town. We still love it. It just, California is very expensive these days, and everything around it. And once you travel for a while, it's hard to, stay still, but maybe one day. But we decided that we're going to move into a camper, and anybody who goes from a house to a trailer knows that it's a big, drastic difference. And people see what we're in now, and they're like, wow, there's 5 of you. They're all bigger, and how do you guys fit into this? I would never recommend somebody going from a house, and if they live in a house now, presumably it's bigger than the one we came from, to go into a van full time. It would be crazy. But for us, it's fine because we took smaller steps. We kind of went down to an Airstream 25-footer, and then we stepped down to a truck camper that was actually probably smaller than the van.
Yeah.
But then we added if you guys know, we added a casita, 70-foot casita trailer that we towed behind for a year before we sold all of those to buy our Sprinter van. So the reason why we traveled in the Airstream until 2015.
15? I think it was 7 years in the Airstream.
Yeah, 7 years in the Airstream, because the summer of 2015. Well, let's go to the spring. Spring of 2015, we had visited all 48 states, all lower 48 states,
right.
And we didn't just drive through them and count that we visited them too. We made sure that we stayed at least a couple of nights and visited some local stuff in every state, and most of them we went to twice, at least. Many of them on the West Coast, we practically spent every summer in there. Every other year between 2010 and 2014. So, yeah, we stayed west 2 years, and then we went east the other years. Right. So every other year, even up until this last year, it seemed like we went east, all the way to the East Coast every other year. So that spring, we decided we were going to do Alaska, the last state that we can drive our Airstream to that summer. So we got it all ready. We had it all planned. We had some friends that went the year before, and it looked amazing, so we wanted to go. So 2015, we drove our van with the Airstream up into Canada, and we got to Jasper, where the van that we've had for like 8 years broke down in Jasper. And Jasper is not a big town. There's no car dealerships. There's maybe a couple of places that can do some basic repairs. It's a town that exists for a national park.
Right.
So we had to really think long and hard about what we would do with this breakdown, and then ultimately we didn't want to risk losing time to go to Alaska because the season's really short. We wanted to maximize our time there. So we ended up driving our van that has 120,000 miles at the time, which is nothing for a diesel, which our van, we intentionally bought a diesel. But I drove it all the way from Jasper back down to Whitefish, Montana, and traded it in for a Ford F-250 pickup truck. Drove it back, and then we did Alaska that summer, which was amazing. And in fact, those two things, having the van breakdown and trading for a truck, and then also going to Alaska, they were sort of, the impetuses for getting us to our next phase. Because in Alaska, we went to a lot of places that we shouldn't have taken our Airstream to, probably. And especially the place that we enjoyed, one of the places that we enjoyed the most, which was McCarthy, Alaska. And you go down a 60-mile gravel dirt road each way, and we went sort of later in the season, and we really beat the suspension out of our Airstream, and we had dings from the rocks, and we lost a brake on the trailer on the way out, so we had to order a brake assembly and had it shipped to Valdez, and waited there and got a repair so we can drive back. But that got us thinking that we wanted to go to those kinds of places more and more. And having an Airstream wasn't practical.
Easier. You don't have to worry about towing,
Yeah, having an Airstream, was a problem if we wanted to do. Because we also knew that, okay, when we were there, we were thinking, well, we should go to Mexico. And we had talked about going to Mexico, and towing a big shiny Airstream, was something that we didn't necessarily want to do. And we know that there's a lot of dirt roads there as well.
And narrow roads.
Narrow dirt roads. And especially if you go down into mainland, which we did, a lot of these towns are kind of old colonial towns. They're old Spanish colonial towns that, has narrow one-way roads. And towing a trailer is not a good idea. You can do it. You can definitely do it. It's just, you have to stay on the outskirts of town and drive into town every day, which isn't ideal.
And speaking also of why we decided to switch from the Airstream is we sort of got comfortable in it. You know, it started feeling like a residential home to us where we're on the couch, we're watching TV, we have plenty of room. It just kind of, I don't know, we needed a little bit of adventure in us again. The adventure kind of stopped, I guess.
Well, it's the similar feeling that we had when we were living in a house.
Right.
You know, we want to be able to go out and do things. And in the Airstream we were, but having these places that we wanted to go that we didn't feel comfortable taking the Airstream started to feel like being in a house, not being able to go out and do things.
Right.
You know, so to a different degree. So we started doing some research, and we had the F-250 truck, and we're like, wow, this is kind of a perfect platform to put a truck camper in the back. But we wanted a smaller truck camper so we can still tow the Airstream if we wanted to. And this truck camper had to be flush to the back of the bed so that we can still tow, so it didn't have an overhang. And our truck at the time was a diesel, a 2016 diesel 6.5 foot standard size bed, which, you know, we narrowed down to 2 truck campers that were pop-ups. One of them was the 4-wheel camper, and the other one was the Alaskan camper. On the way back from Alaska to California, we stopped in Washington State and went to the Alaskan Camper Factory. And they're beautiful campers. You know, seeing them being built was even more amazing. So we began thinking about, okay, what kind of layout can we do for a 6.5 foot bed? And, you know, ultimately it came down that we knew that the 6.5 foot bed wasn't going to do it, because we needed to have a bed for the kids to sleep on the top, because the top of the camper had basically a king size bed that all 3 of our kids can sleep side by side. And the dinette was a 4-person dinette that's essentially a full-size bed that we can make into a bed more or less full-time, and we'll just have to, you know, hang out outside, which is what we wanted to do anyways. So a layout like that was the only setup in a pop-up truck camper that would work. Alaska camper could do it, but it would probably have to be like an 8-foot bed for it to be flush in the back. And then we went to 4-wheel campers. We saw those too in Northern California on our way back. And they also have a very similar layout with a dinette in the front, 4-person, and then a king-size bed on top. Ultimately, it came down to 2 things. One was the price. I think it was about $5,000 less for the 4-wheel camper at the time. 4-wheel campers have gone up in price.
Maybe it was closer to 10.
Well,
I don't know. It seemed like it was.
I want to say it was like
difference.
23 versus 28, because I think we could have gotten an Alaskan for like 28, and maybe we pay like 23, 24 for the 4-wheel. But 4-wheel camper, since we bought it, we placed our order in 2015, and every year it's gone up about $3,000 or so. So it's gone up like $10,000 almost since we bought ours. And we still really love ours. And in fact, we took that all the way through Mexico. We did most of the states all the way down to, we didn't go down to the Guatemala border, but we went down as far as Oaxaca. Salina Cruz is the further south city that we went on the coast. And that was like maybe 300 miles from the Guatemala border. So we came back from there thinking that, man, you know, that was great. We want to do more adventures abroad in a foreign country. Not only was it great to see something new, it was also great for the kids to be immersed in a foreign culture, speaking different languages, and, you know, meeting people that look different, speak differently, dress differently, you know, live a different life. So all that was very cool for us. So then we decided, okay, one of the initial ideas was that we would keep going south, you know, maybe do Central and South America. But because of our truck, so because we needed the 8-foot camper, we'll go back a little bit. We ended up having to sell our 6.5-foot bed diesel truck because we wanted to get an 8-foot bed for the longer truck camper. And also, these modern diesels require ultra-low sulfur diesel. And most of mainland Mexico, in fact, I think everywhere besides within 500 miles of the northern U.S. border doesn't carry ultra-low sulfur. So that was a problem. And so that's why we ended up selling that truck again for another vehicle. And we bought a same truck, basically. The white truck that we had before, that was a gasoline Ford F-250 4x4 with an 8-foot bed.
A little less fancy inside.
Yeah, it's what I wanted. I wanted a very basic, no frills kind of truck. In fact, we went looking for this truck all over Southern California. And we even saw some that had roll-up windows.
No.
Yeah. You didn't want that.
No, I don't want to roll up windows.
Well, had that truck had four-wheel drive, we would have bought it probably.
Oh, it didn't have it?
It didn't have four-wheel drive. So we ended up finding, I think, the perfect truck. You know, it had everything that I wanted and everything that I didn't want also it didn't have. So it was like we sold the diesel truck for more money than it cost to buy that gas truck. But that diesel truck was very nice. It was a really nice truck. We lost some money on that truck, but, you know, doing what we had to do, we had to make the change.
Right. It took us to Alaska, and that was life-changing. So it was totally worth whatever we lost on it.
Yeah, and, you know, we had a Canadian camper shell canopy, fiberglass canopy put in the back.
Right.
Which was not a good canopy.
No. Very bad.
Maybe it was also the roads that we were driving. It couldn't clamp onto the side of the beds very tight. So some of these roads, it slowly moved forward towards the cab. And because it moved forward, like the opening, the window, like randomly popped open, and we lost our bag full of our rain jackets. They're nice, like Patagonia jackets, not just for me and Marlene, and all three of the kids too.
Yeah. Our one splurge for the trip, out the window.
Yeah.
Literally.
Literally out the window. And my hope is that there's some really happy Alaskan residents wearing these jackets right now in the cold weather. So Mexico with a 3/4 ton pickup, we should have been able to go down to Guatemala. But while we were down there was just this weird interpretation of the import rules for vehicles that they didn't, for some reason, at the time, it's changed since, they didn't allow us to leave Guatemala and then be able to come back. They were preventing people with vehicles like ours from coming back into Mexico. And had we gone down there, we would have had to ship it back across the Gulf of Mexico. So, long story short, that's why we didn't go further south. So we came back, then we had our sights set on Europe. So that's sort of why we started looking at vans. And why we chose a van, the reason why we stuck with a truck and a truck camper, one of the big reasons was that we wanted to still be able to tow the Airstream. But after being in the truck camper for almost 2 years, we realized that the Airstream we will always own, but we probably will never full-time travel in it again.
The layout doesn't work for us with 3 kids now. It worked with 2 kids, but 3 kids.
Yeah, because the last couple of years while we were in it, Luca was just born, and he slept on the queen bed in the bedroom with us those 2 years. We can't have that now. No. He can't sleep with us anymore.
Kicked out.
Yeah. So, and not only, you know, because of that, like we would have to do some remodeling, you know, to make the dimensions work, to make the layout work. But also, you know, we just enjoy this types of traveling to more remote places way more than before.
And we all adapted. Like the first week we were in the 4-wheel camper and we were in Baja and San Felipe. Like all of us it was the best. It was such a natural progression for us. It was very strange. We weren't expecting it. And it was, we were all just surprised, and it worked. And there's no reason to go back to the Airstream if we were happy in that moment. Right.
So we spent the next summer traveling the West. We went all the way up to Washington, went over to, I think went as far as South Dakota, and then came back around. We sort of wanted to do this loop, because when we downsized, we went to Mexico right away. We bought the camper. We ordered it in November, picked it up in December, and crossed the border into Mexico in January. So it was all very fast. And we didn't build it out because we wanted to keep our momentum going coming back from Alaska. So when we came back to the U.S. The following year, we thought this would be great if we just kind of take this smaller rig and travel the U.S. for another year and go to places that we haven't been before, which is what we did. But what we also decided after halfway through that year is that this is all places that we've been before. Like, this is fun. This is great. We love going to these places still, but we should push ourselves into seeing more stuff and more new things. And we kind of miss being in Mexico and new culture, different language. So, again, we were thinking Europe. And the initial thought was that we would just keep the truck camper and we would ship the truck camper over and live in that. And we talked to a few people and they're like, yeah, you can ship it over. It's going to be big. It's going to be, there's not going to be anything as big as this. But in my mind was always, well, they have Sprinter vans and those things are pretty big. So if a Sprinter van can drive around Europe, our truck camper can certainly drive around Europe. So I did some research, and I've seen people. There's a four-wheel camper dealer in Germany, So I know that there's trucks here that have four-wheel campers on them. So we didn't really think anything about, the things that people said about it being big. But then when we really started looking close to it, and when we kind of compared the dimensions to a van, we realized that the four-wheel camper and the truck is like 6 inches wider than a Sprinter van. And that didn't dissuade me until we started to look at more closely about like the cost of traveling in Europe. And ultimately, the decision was made to switch to a Sprinter van because how poor the gas mileage was in our truck.
Right. It was like, when with the casita, I don't know how much it was without the casita, but it was like 9 miles per gallon.
It was 9 with the casita. I think we got like 11 without the casita. And that was driving straight, pretty flat roads. Like when we drove through Trans-Labrador Highway, that was pretty straight. Well, I mean, we had a headwind too, but we could probably do 12 on a good day with our 6.2-liter gas engine in that F-250. So we realized that gas is going to be 2 to 3 times per gallon here in Europe. And we can probably get almost double the fuel economy. So that equated to like, a 5 to 9 time cost difference if we switch to a Sprinter van. And if we're going to be here for 1 or 2 years, that easily can become a huge amount of money if we decide to see all of Europe. So that, I think, was ultimately why we decided to go with a van. So we're going to go with something that had better fuel economy, and we're not going to full-time tow our Airstream anymore, so having that truck wasn't as critical anymore.
Right.
And also, the interior of a van attracted us for the same reason why it attracts a lot of people, which is compared to a truck camper, the interior of a van, you don't waste the cab space. The space where you sit when you drive can be used when you're camping and when you're living. So we really like that because when we're in the truck camper, every time we got somewhere, if we got somewhere late at night, the kids fall asleep, we have to like park and go back and pop up and get the beds ready. And then we have to come back and carry the kids one by one through a small little opening in the door in the back, put them in bed. In the van is so much easier. Like we just get up and walk back there without opening the door. So
another benefit also is not having a pop-up with soft sides, it's fine in regular weather, but with the 5 of us, in colder weather, which Europe will have a lot more colder weather for us than what we're used to in the U.S., there's a lot of condensation, a lot of dripping. And so to not have that also is something that I appreciate now.
Right. And it's also wasn't as well insulated. We didn't have the thermal pack, which they sell. And we actually ended up buying the thermal pack after we came back from the Canadian Maritimes in Atlantic Canada, that we need this thermal pack, which helps insulate and also helps with condensation. We bought it, we never saw it, because when we sold our truck and truck camper, we hadn't even gotten it yet. It had just gotten delivered to our friend who had also ordered one. It was shipped to his place. So our friends who bought our truck and truck camper just drove down to our other friend's house and picked it up. So we bought it and never saw it. And that might have helped, but at the same time, when we were in Newfoundland, there were a couple of really, really windy nights, and we didn't feel comfortable with the kids sleeping on top, and it was really loud with the winds flapping on the sides, and we didn't feel safe. So those are some of the reasons why. And being in the van, and also when we decided to go to Europe, we knew that we wanted to travel during the off season, because for 5 people to fly to Europe during summer, it would be really expensive. So the plane tickets were for them to be the off season had to be before May or after September, and we basically decided to do this after our traveling to the U.S. in 2017. So that was about fall, winter, and then we had months to sort of get everything sorted out and ready. We had a couple of the big projects we had to do, so we had time. When we switched to the 4-wheel camper and truck, we didn't have that much time. We decided late, and we wanted to be in Mexico by January. So we didn't have that much time, so we bought it totally built out. But this time we had time to kind of build out our own van. So when we decided to switch, we went to go look for vans. We looked at everything. We looked at Ford Transits, we looked at Ram ProMasters, we looked at used vans, new vans, we looked at Sprinters. Ultimately, Marlene really wanted to have a 4-wheel drive van. Not for any other reason, but our time in Mexico, there were times when we needed 4-wheel drive. Not because we were driving off-road to remote, crazy places. It was just driving on sand, driving on mud, and when it rains, or didn't want to get stuck going down a dirt road if there's ruts or whatever. And it's not that we go out looking for trouble, because sometimes trouble will find you. You can always get out without a 4-wheel drive with rocks or shovel or whatever. But having 3 kids on board, the last thing you want is to struggle for hours and hours to get yourself loose so that you can leave a place. It's a difference between spending a couple hours getting dirty, getting out, versus putting the 4-wheel drive and then off you go. And at first I said, okay, well, Ram ProMasters are out because they don't make a 4-wheel drive version. Ford Transits are not factory 4-wheel drive, but there are companies that will build it for you. But all of those take a huge long lead time to get in line and have one built. And it came down to Sprinter vans, and that was kind of difficult too, because I knew that Sprinter vans are in super high demand, especially the 4-wheel drive ones. So I told Marlene, hey, we can go look at Sprinter vans if you want. They're way more expensive 4-wheel drive, and you're not going to find one. There's no way that you can just walk into a dealership and buy a 4x4 Sprinter van, because people wait years, sometimes years for one. I know because my brother has had one on order for like a year and a half, and it's been delayed and delayed and delayed, and he...
And you know everything.
I mean, it's true. All the things that I'm saying are true. And there are people that have been waiting. But it just so happened that we went to the dealership 5 minutes from Marlene's parents' house where we were staying at the time during the holidays. And lo and behold, they had the exact same color, the exact same layout, model, roof height, and wheelbase, and color that somebody had special ordered and then backed out because he couldn't get a good enough trade on his vehicle that he was trading in. So he walked away, and that meant that we were walking into this vehicle that was perfect for us. I didn't want to spend, people say if you look at the dealer invoice, the four-wheel drive on a Sprinter van is only like a $7,000 or $8,000 upgrade. But the difference is they'll wheel and deal on two-wheel drive versions all day long because they got to compete against Transits and ProMasters everywhere. But on a four-wheel drive, they will not budge on the price. Maybe a couple $100. Most I've heard is like $1,000 if they're really desperate to get rid of it for whatever reason. But they'll take 10 grand off of a two-wheel drive van, and they won't take anything off of a four-wheel drive van. So the $8,000 difference suddenly becomes like a $20,000 difference. So it's a difference between like a $35,000 van versus a $60,000 van. But ultimately, I think we ended up buying it, but buying the four-wheel drive van will be better for us in the long run because they also keep their value much better because there are fewer of them in the market, and people are looking for them. They're very, very desirable. And especially now, knowing how crazy people are for vans, and especially four-wheel drive vans, I'm seeing prices. These are like legit upfitters of Sprinter vans. They're charging upwards of $250,000 for a van like ours, built by them professionally, of course. So, we couldn't pay that kind of price. But we could buy a $60,000 van because we owned our truck, we owned our truck camper, we owned our casita, and those were all paid in cash from money that we saved. So by selling all of those things, two campers and one truck, it was pretty much a straight swap for us to get an empty van.
3 for 1.
Yeah, it was a 3-for-1 deal for us to get the van. So that's how we ended up with the Sprinter van. And then, so this was in April of 2018. So we weren't going to be able to do all this in a month and still make it to the low season plane fares by May. So then we knew that we had to leave in September. So that gave us 5 months to work on all of our projects and build the van out. Our other projects took massive amounts of time too, which is also why, when we were building our van, we had to sort of abruptly stop and go do our other projects and then slowly kind of finish towards the end of our stay in the U.S.
Do you want to talk about why we didn't just buy a van in Europe and build it out here?
Yeah. That's
part of our choice.
That's a legitimate thing that people would want to know, and there's really nice vans here in Europe, and we knew that back then too. And we talked to people who were traveling in Europe that have either shipped their van or bought their van here, and ultimately the reason why we didn't go that route is because, number one, very few vans are built for 5 people, for a family of 5. Very few ready-to-go vans are built for that people. Even custom vans aren't built for a family of 5. So for us to think that we can just kind of fly here and then start looking around to buy a van is that would work for us would be, it's like a needle in a haystack. I don't think that would have been realistic.
Even if there was, we couldn't find one without a bathroom, like a separate shower bathroom, which we don't want. It's a waste of space for us. So there's no way there's a 5-person van ready to go here without a bathroom.
Well, I mean, the big reason why that there aren't 5-person vans is because they have bathrooms, right? So in order for us to make ours work is that, we can save a lot of space by using a little portable toilet and, just shower in other places or shower outside like we do with our road shower. But yeah, I mean, we weren't going to take a chance coming over here and start looking for a van and have to end up staying at an Airbnb for who knows how long.
Months? Yeah.
Months. And then if we do find one that needs work and try to source supplies and tools and
no tools,
everything
no
to build it out.
Stay, no
place to work it.
Power tools.
No place. I mean, as it is.
And probably in a country where people don't speak English as their main language.
The countries that speak English as one of their primary languages are usually more expensive to be at.
Right.
So, and that's just going to add to the cost. And also, once you buy it and you're in it for a couple of years, you're going to have to sell it. I mean, when you're ready to leave, when you're done traveling here, chances are you're done. Like you want kind of these transactions to happen and you want to sell it. And if you don't pay the right price for one, you're not going to be able to get most of your money back probably. You get, hopefully a good chunk of your money back. So, our thought was that building it guarantees us that we will have the layout that we want. Have all the equipment that we want. We'll know it. We'll get to kind of drive around and work out all the kinks and make it perfect before we travel in Europe. So that's why we didn't come here and buy one.
And it's not our first rodeo, so we know exactly how we want our beds laid out. We know exactly our bathroom and shower situation. We know how we want our children seated in the van, windows, and when we had our cat, where cat stuff's going to go. So we had a lot of logistics, and we knew exactly, with all these years of experience of full-timing, we knew what worked and what didn't work for us. And nobody was going to have anything ready for us that would fit that criteria. 0%
and being
chance.
The four-wheel camper for a year and a half also gave us, the idea of how we wanted to lay out a van. So in a way, our van is sort of laid out very similarly to the four-wheel camper.
Right.
It's different, but conceptually it's the same. The kids sleep on top, we sleep on the bottom, and there's a side. Well, yeah, it's a side galley.
And the other side is the fridge.
The other side is the fridge and the toilet storage. The seating arrangement's different, but this is all. I mean, it's all very similar. So we knew what we wanted. We knew how we wanted to build it. But it wasn't an easy decision. Like all these things that we're seeing right now, we thought long and hard about whether or not we should do it. It would have been probably much cheaper to come over here and buy a used van, but it would have been cheaper from the perspective of how much the van would cost, but it may not have been cheaper overall, because we would end up probably keeping our truck camper in the U.S., and it would just sit there for a couple of years depreciating. And then by the time we got back there, we don't know if we would have still, wanted to keep it. And the other things, okay, maybe we sell it. But then we won't have a car if we, when we're done, we have to come back and buy another car. And what car will we buy then? And how much will we spend to buy that car?
The stress of building a van out in a foreign country was not worth it for us. It wasn't worth the stress that would put on us individually or, as a couple and, balancing school. So when we were building it out in LA, we were at my parents' house and my parents cooked us meals, helped with schooling with the kids, watched the kids while we ran errands. Like we wouldn't have had that here in Europe. It'd be so much more difficult. It wasn't worth the stress. And trying to sell it, like you said, afterwards and selling something so customized for 5 people and a cat with no bathroom be really, really hard to sell. And we'd waste our time trying to sell it and be an Airbnb while we're trying to do that.
Yeah, that's all true. I mean, and I think if we wanted a four-wheel drive, we weren't going to find it in Europe because you just don't see that many four-wheel drives. What we found out later on after buying our Sprinter is that the U.S. market is the biggest market in the world for four-wheel drive Sprinters. So Mercedes actually prioritizes four-wheel drive Sprinters for the U.S. market over any other country. So, we would have came here, we would have bought something that wouldn't have been ideal for us, even after building it out.
I don't think we're going to have, it's getting a long podcast. I don't think we're going to have enough time to go on the van build, but I'd like to talk about, we purposely wanted to do foreign travel, and we purposely ditched our diesel truck for a gas truck. But when we came to Europe, all of a sudden we're on a new diesel, Yeah,
Europe is not a developing, there are some developing countries here, but, by and large, we're going to be mostly in EU countries. And all the EU countries have ultra-low sulfur diesel. And diesel is much more common in Europe than in North America.
Right.
So that's why, being a modern diesel wasn't a problem. And also, there's no Ford F-250s in Europe. They don't sell them here. So if we had any problems, we couldn't find a mechanic to work on it. Mexico is a different story. There are F-250s everywhere. And every truck we saw was a gas F-250 or a gas F-350. So we felt comfortable driving that through there.
Our thinking is after we're done with Europe, we're shipping our van back, and we're going to continue. I'm sure as soon as we get back, we're going to head straight down to Baja, depending on, the month, you know. And by then, in 2-3 years, however long we're here for, the chances of them having ultra-low diesel is going to be a lot better.
Well, they've been talking about getting ultra-low sulfur diesel in Mexico forever. Like, for years now, there's rumors about them doing this, doing that. But something finally changed this last year. I've not personally confirmed it by going down there to see it. If any of you have ever gone down to Mexico, you know that Mexican fuel stations are all state-owned Pemex stations. And that's been the case for as long as I've been alive, I think. Except last year, this is what I heard, is that they're now allowing different brand gas stations to be down there, which is a major, major change. And then I hear the same thing that I've heard for many, many years, is that by the end of next year, they're going to have ultra-low sulfur diesel everywhere. So if that's true, this is going to be
that's true, and even if it's delayed by a year or two, we won't be back for, another year or two after the changes are supposed to happen.
Right.
So that's what our thinking was with the diesel.
Well, every vehicle that I buy, I buy vehicles because I plan to own them for at least 10 years. That wasn't the case for our first van. We owned it for 8, but our hand was kind of forced when it broke and we were going to Alaska. The next 2 F-250 trucks, same thing. I would have loved to keep both of them, but our hands were forced. It wasn't the right vehicle for us. Again, with this Sprinter, I plan to keep this van for at least 10 years. Hopefully nothing happens that forces me to sell it and buy something else. But for the foreseeable future, this will be our van. Our kids are getting older, so I don't know, how that will work, and if they want to go to high school. Ava's going to be 12 in a month, and in 3 years she'll be in high school. So we'll see how all that stuff works out. And that's another reason why we're here in Europe, because we want her to be here when she's still, willing and happy to do it.
Right. She's into it right now.
She's really into it. She's more into it than the other kids.
She'll be into it this whole time, but there's always, hormones are coming. So we got to.
Yeah. You know how it is. You guys all have been teenagers yourselves. Unless you're a preteen listening to this, which...
Then maybe you should ask your parents.
What are you doing? Why are you listening to me talk?
Marlene says bad words sometimes.
Yeah. Do not listen to Marlene. Do not watch her Instagram stories. Just kidding. Watch her Instagram stories. There's
They're
hardly
PG,
any bad
they're
words in
PG.
there. So yeah, I don't think we're going to get to the actual building of our van, but I think that's okay. Like, I think we covered some important stuff.
Right. I think we missed talking about why we got the casita. Because after we came back into the U.S., I think you were having a hard time concentrating and having your own space to work. And that's the reason why we got the casita, to have an extra space for the kids and I to do school while you did work and other things.
Okay, so that's actually a good point. So if we're going to just talk about the reasons why we switched to the van, then we can talk a little bit more detail about all the other things. Traveling through Mexico was kind of difficult for me from work perspective, right? Like you said, it was tough for me to have a dedicated workspace, and I did a lot of working outside. I did a lot of working in restaurants, and
topless on the beach,
like standing by the stove. And I was working full time. Between 2013 and 2018, I worked full time for a company. And the other reason why that we're able to do what we're doing here in Europe is also in those 5 years, I had to make office visits every few months, and that just wasn't going to work. So part of the project that we were doing while we were building out the van is so that we can kind of rearrange our finances a little bit to make Europe more feasible, because obviously now we're here in Europe, I'm not making office visits. I had to leave that full-time job and go back to freelancing so that I can make this part of our lives happen. So the last year while we were there, when we came back to the U.S. from Mexico, we bought the casita, a 17-foot casita, which was a great trailer. We loved every minute that we had it. Marlene didn't enjoy towing anymore, but it was smaller and it wasn't wider than the truck. So wherever we went, if the truck can fit, the casita can fit, which wasn't the case for the Airstream. But it made working a lot easier. So the truck camper at that point became my office, and the casita was where we slept, where we ate, where Marlene and the kids did school. So now that we're in Europe, we sort of had to make those compromises again. I'm working freelance, part-time, but when we get back in the van, we'll have to make sure that, we can kind of have all those things kind of figured out. We have the cab space that we didn't have when we were in the truck camper before. Now that we can kind of gain that back in the van, so I'm hoping we can dedicate that to my workspace, and then we have other spaces for school and all that other stuff. So the casita we had from February 2017 until March 2018, a little over a year. And that was a great trailer. We got lucky with that one. Four-wheel camper too. We got lucky with that, and as far as being able to order it, because like the Sprinter, they're very desirable, and there's a high demand and low supply. The four-wheel camper and the casita they're both sort of made to order, and you can only buy them from the factory, and there's usually like a 3 to 6 month lead time depending on when you order it. We got lucky with the four-wheel camper. We were able to order it in like November and or maybe October and take delivery in December. And because people aren't ordering campers in the fall. They had just come back from camping. People usually start thinking about their summer travels in the spring. So we had a really easy time ordering that. With the casita, we called and we called the factory, and then they said, well, yeah, you can order now, and you'll get delivery just before summer. And this was like December, and they say you can get it in May. Well, that's not going to work. We want to be on the road far before that. So they were able to kind of shuffle us with somebody else that's already been in line waiting. But there, if you guys ever decide to order a camper like that, especially from Casita, ask them, if there's a way for you to kind of switch with somebody else that's in line, because often there are people that have been waiting for their camper, but because there's a long wait, they put their order in to get in line, but then they're sort of undecided as to like what options they want. So sometimes they'll intentionally delay their order and switch with people just so that they can, have a little bit more time thinking about it. So that's what happened with us in the Casita, and that was really fortunate. But, it was exactly the trailer that we wanted. Didn't have a bathroom because, by the time we came back from Mexico and having lived in the four-wheel camper for a year, we knew that it was not something that we needed to have.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It was a porta potty.
Yeah.
Or a little portable toilet, whatever you call it.
Which, again, if you're downsizing from living in a house into a camper, like, I would recommend against not having a toilet the first time around. Your first camper should be something that you're going to be happy with, that you're going to be comfortable in, because otherwise,
for long-term success.
Yeah, you would.
I think
you would despise the lifestyle too fast, too soon. So, and I think that's we're not gonna go into the building of our 4x4 Sprinter van. I think this is a good background of how we arrived at the van.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people ask or wonder, like, what is wrong with you guys?
Yeah. So now I have to go back to the beginning and record like a pre-roll that talks about, hey, at the beginning of this podcast, you can hear us saying that we're going to talk about the building of the van.
Yeah.
That's not actually going to happen. So
That's all right.
I have to let people know. That's all right. So I think that was helpful, but episode 6, that's going to be the building of the van. I hope so.
It will.
All right. It will. Well, I want to thank you guys for subscribing and listening to our podcast. I hope that was helpful for you. If you guys have any questions, we're trying to decide how, obviously there's all these other social channels that you can kind of get a hold of us through our email, through our Instagram, our Facebook, our YouTube, our Twitter. But I think a good way to kind of ask us questions for the podcast would be just to go on Twitter. If you have a Twitter account, go ahead and tweet at us. We're at Molly Mish on Twitter. But go ahead and hashtag Molly Mish Podcast. Any questions that you have, anything you want us to answer, anything that you want us to maybe kind of explain on this podcast, because I think this is a great long form, sort of medium to be able to kind of get really in depth into things. So that way, YouTube videos are much too long and people aren't watching videos when they're driving or when they're exercising or whatever. But this is a great place to kind of get into a lot of detail, kind of like what we did here with our transition. So go ahead and tag Molly Mish Podcasts in Twitter if you want us to answer anything. And, if you're not following us on Instagram, Twitter, or any of these social channels, we appreciate it if you do. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.